I would invite anyone from the Office of Grants and Community Development to come up and present. Going once?
Councilmember One, we have reached out to the administration.
Budget request denied. Okay. All right. Well, we will sit quietly and patiently in the hopes that we are joined.
Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Acting Department of Grants and Contracts.
I've been in contact with them, and they have assured me that they do not need any funding in FY23.
Councilmember, shut up.
And so I'm going to make a motion that we reallocate the money to City Council's helicopter fund.
Second. Seeing no objection, motion carries. We stand adjourned. Colleagues, I understand that the department is coming, so there was a mix-up in terms of our start time, but they are on their way, and we will begin as soon as they arrive.
Good morning. Good morning. She's on her way. Yeah. Okay.
It sounded like she was, might have been put in the parking garage.
Yeah. We thought it was.
Okay. And she was also,
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
no, thank you. You doing okay? Okay. Not too far. Exactly. Did you enjoy the game last night? Did your son enjoy it? He enjoyed it. I was very good. Okay. He was sitting there with us and she was talking about it. It was like sweet. Thank you. He was you should be ready to stay there like we've been because it's school. Right. You just were almost close to that. I was like, she just complaining about her. Because she knows she's someone. She's got an internship, but she's like, oh, I'm going to do this. Or didn't do it right. Did do something right. So she was like, oh, my back. You know, so sit down. Yeah, sit down in that chair. But I was just glad she came. You know, she was like, this is fine. Yeah, we stayed today. We wanted to see how they serve the green. CT Mark got too. It kept getting tired. And the last quarter was really intense. Really good. Yeah, every time they went, and they had rain. They got we do that for little too. They get the little small.
Yes, I'm ready. It pulls up. It's already up, right? Yeah, I'm good. I apologize. Thank you. I'm ready from the car. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes. Good morning. I know you're running. Where do you want me to sit? Last year was virtual, so I'm not sure.
You're up there.
Yes.
We only had one question, but it's been resolved. She was saying 6, so I said 8. A little more than a week now. So as for which we understand, these 6 positions, they are already in the personnel.
Who's that? Okay, let me tell Chandra.
Great. All right, colleagues, we have after that confusion, sorry about that, we have our presenters here, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge that we have also been joined by my colleagues, council members Byron Amos, Antonio Lewis, and Mary Norwood, and again, I expect that we'll have folks circulating in and out as their schedules permit. Thank you for, and apologize for the mix-up in terms of time starts this morning, but I appreciate your being able to rally quickly and be here. And I understand that staff is working with the administration to get copies of the presentation for us. But in the meantime, we have it on screen. I think you've got the clicker in front of you. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves and then take it away, we will be ready with our questions. And if you can make sure the microphone is on and pulled close to you. Colleagues, if you're following in your hymnals, we are on page 453 of the budget book.
Here we are. Is that better? All right. Good morning. I'm Deborah London, Commissioner for the City's Department of Grants and Community Development.
Good morning. My name is Ola Akosa. I'm the Director of Fiscal Operations for the Department of Grants.
Okay. And we'll just jump right in. Here we're just highlighting 3 of the key program areas that the department focuses on. We receive 4 entitlement grants. Those are CDBG Home, HOPWA, ESG. But Section 8, while it's not an entitlement grant, the city does receive funding for Section 8. The next slide highlights the organizational structure for the department. We have restructured the department since I started November of 2020 and have aligned it so that there are 3 different offices. The Office of Program Operations has a director and then the staff that are listed under. Program Operations addresses those entitlement areas and works directly with the subrecipients who provide the services for our residents. And then there's the Office of Compliance, and there's a director for that office, 1 manager, and then the staff that are listed under that office. And then the Office of Fiscal Operations, and Ola is the director for that office. It also has 1 manager and the staff that are addressed. The department has a total of 54 full-time positions. 17 of those positions are funded with general funds, and the remaining are funded with grant funds. This next slide addresses the summary of our operations. The general budget reflected for 21-22, and then, of course, we're before you with the proposed for 23. And then the head counts that I just mentioned earlier. The operational areas and our key metrics for those areas are also listed. We have focused on timeliness of reimbursements. Undoubtedly, everyone who is familiar with our department knows that timeliness has been a concern. We have improved the time significantly for how reimbursements are processed and when reimbursements are made. We started, unfortunately, with an average of more than 160 days for reimbursements. We are now less than 60 days for reimbursements, moving very quickly towards the 2 CFR mandatory requirement of 30 days, and we do expect that we will be there in the next fiscal year. We also focused on compliance risk assessment, executing contracts. We're further changing and amending the processes for executing our contracts so that they can also be aligned with the fiscal calendar and the program year. Our program burn rate from the subrecipients, monitoring that's conducted internally, as well as the monitoring that HUD conducts with the city, and then, of course, our accomplishment data. The key metrics are reflected on the bottom right of this slide. The average day, of course, at that point was 69, but as I stated, we're lower than 60 now, working towards the 30. Risk tools are used for monitoring, and the risk tool completion was averaging 20 days. Contracts executed per quarter is 8. We are committed to increasing that and making sure that all contracts are fully executed and aligned with the program timeline, the program year. The program amount expended by quarter is reflected, and that's the total amount expended for all of the entitlement funds that the city receives. The number of monitorings completed, this reflects 0, as at the time we were moving from desk monitoring to actual on-site monitoring. We have completed many desk monitorings to date and are now beginning our on-site monitoring in preparation for HUD's on-site monitoring of the department. And then the percentage of monthly reports submitted, 86%. The next slide focuses on the general budget. Here you'll see that it's only reflected for the general funds, but if you'll remember, a good bit of our department is actually funded with the administrative portions of grants and not just the general funds that the city provides. We are well situated, better situated than we were last year and previous years with the proposed general fund budget that's been submitted before you. The next slide focuses on some key metrics and some goals as well as accomplishments coming forward for this next calendar and fiscal year and program year, because all three of those are different. On the left side, you'll see that for CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grants, we served 1,140 residents, and that was about $5.9 million. But for this coming fiscal year, the goal is to fully expend within the program year the entire $7 million that's been allocated to the city. With the home program, we served approximately 19 households, so not 19 individuals, but households with $513,000. And we will fully expend $4.2 million in the coming calendar, fiscal, and program years. With our ESG, Emergency Solutions Grants for homeless needs, we served 842 families, totaling about $460,000. Of course, based upon previous information that we presented to you, you know that we're expending far more than that collectively, and we will increase that during this fiscal and program and operational year to $627,000. With HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, we served approximately 1,102 households with $15.6 million, and we will fully expend the $22.7 million that remains to be expended currently. This is on the personnel deployment strategies and in our contracts and agreements. We have remaining few positions. I will tell you, council members, that Even 6 months ago, we had almost 50% of our positions vacant. And with the support of the mayor's office and this council, we've been able to fill all of our key positions. And so while we still have analyst positions open, we are being very intentional about who we fill those positions with. It is important for our department that it's not just someone who wants the position, but someone who has entitlement experience specifically. And there's not a whole lot of people applying for those positions who have the exact skill set we need, but we are being intentional and continuing to fill our remaining vacant positions. Again, as mentioned, we're decreasing the contract processing time, just as we've decreased the reimbursement processing time, and we remain committed to aligning the contracts with the program year and the operational and the fiscal years. Increasing the number of qualified respondents for our federal awards. We're currently in our NOFA process right now, and again, being very intentional about who and how we process those applications for those entities who wish to be funded, making sure that they are well informed and educated and fully understand what will be expected of them in both providing the services as well as receiving their reimbursements. And then, of course, continuing to remain committed to eliminating the reimbursement backlog. We focus on two types of grants primarily in the department. Entitlement grants, which come from HUD. Those are the HOPWA, the ESG, the HOME, the CDBG that I mentioned previously. And then our competitive grants that non-DCGD departments are applying for. On the entitlement side, of course, we must comply with federal regulations. The goal is to better assist our subrecipients so that they can better serve our residents. On the competitive side, we are shifting now to assisting our fellow departments in their applications and submission of applications of the competitive grants that are provided from other federal entities and state entities, so not just HUD. We're looking to be a sole source type of location whereby you all in the mayor's office can come to the department and we'll have the necessary information so that we are collecting data, making decisions based on data, and moving forward with better informed information and data. And I believe that's it. Thank you again for working with us in the time shift.
Good. All right, we've got questions from Shook, then Lewis, and then I've got some as well. So,
Yes, sir.
Shook.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there appears to be a discrepancy here in the budget book regarding FTEs.
Yes, sir.
So we're showing what we have in front of us shows prior year, well, this fiscal year, FY22, 6 moving to 12. So what are the true numbers?
Yes, sir. So the true numbers
For general fund.
for general funds are 17 positions for general funds. And there were some positions that have since been approved, and the Department of Finance is aware of that and making those changes.
So that's 17 in FY23.
Correct.
Okay, so, and that's an increase over how many from prior year?
It's an increase of 6 from the prior year.
Okay, 6. So, okay, so you're adding 6 people, everyone's getting a 2% COLA, and yet your budget, your salary line shows a decrease from last year, so.
Yes, sir. That is an error that the Department of Finance is addressing, but they were aware and we are aware, and I believe they'll be providing that update.
So it's going to be an increase,
Yes, sir.
but we don't know what that looks like at this time.
So to address the salaries line item, what we did, as you all recall, we took people sitting in seats in March, which would have really been very detrimental to the Department of Grants because they had so many vacancies. So our approach was to bump their salaries line item back up to roughly about what they had in the FY22 adopted line item, funded at 95%.
And how many vacancies are you currently carrying?
For general funds,
Yeah, general fund.
we just have 2 vacancies in general funds. Yes, sir. And those positions we have identified candidates for those positions.
Okay. And when was this office reorganized? Refresh us.
In 2020.
Okay. So, and one of the reasons why that was heavily supported over here was the hope that with the reorganization and a more muscular organization, there would be maybe fewer opportunities that kind of went by the boards than we felt was the case in prior years. So if you could provide us with some, what I hope is going to be morale-building data showing the last couple of years. I mean, I assume that the return on investment here is going to be more coming in, certainly in terms of competitive grants.
Yes. So competitive grants were not included in the previous iteration of the department. We focus entirely on the entitlement grants. And of course, some of those entitlement grant processes were problematic. We were severely understaffed. We were reimbursing again at an average of 169 days, where the federal regs call for 30 days. We've gone, because of that, improved staffing from 169 days to 69 to less than 60, and of course, getting to 30. We've also become compliant. We were not compliant before. We had 8 special conditions in just one program alone. We've come down to 1 special condition because we are fully staffed and because we're better trained. We had outstanding findings from 2018, 2019, and 2020. We have closed out the majority of those findings and continue to work more closely, more directly, and more timely with the local HUD office, again, because we are better staffed. In addition, contracting was not timely. Contracting, to be quite honest with you, would be often a year behind. So we would be going into fiscal year 22 and submitting FY20 contracts. And while we are still behind in contracts, because we've restructured and we've set aside staff to focus primarily on reimbursements, it's now permitted other staff to focus on contracting and monitoring. And so the most significant impact because of the increased staffing has been our ability to become far more compliant with the HUD regs than we have been in the past years.
Okay. That's all very heartening. I would encourage you to not be shy about including all of these interesting and uplifting points in writing, because this has been a city function that we have been concerned about, and hence our support for you to move in the direction you're moving in. So, please don't hesitate to share these improvement metrics. And then also, I would like to see, I think one of the areas we were particularly concerned about was the attention paid to competitive grants and what we could grab there. So if you could just go back a couple years and
I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
The competitive grants?
Competitive grants.
Yeah, I assume we're going to see upward.
Yes, and the competitive grants are forthcoming as we just received staffing for competitive grants.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Shook. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you for coming this morning.
Yes, sir.
I think what Mr. Shook was saying, he wanted to hear you brag more. So I want to say congratulations, or at least talk about the things that you've done, because when you start talking about it, I started smiling. So I first want to say congratulations on filling all positions under this new mayor and his aggressive plan for hiring folks, and only having 2 positions open and having 2 people in the pipeline. Congratulations on that. And the last congratulations on becoming non-compliant to becoming compliant. That's a huge deal. And to get that done during the pandemic with understaffing here and understaffing on a national level lets me know that y'all have been working.
Yes, sir.
Please brag more about that. What I also gathered from that is something I'm super happy to say is that you can get the job done if you're given the resources. As a union man, I'm happy that that resource was people. And it sounds like if you get your staff, if you get the right amount of staff, the job is done, and you'll take us from from a non-compliant city to a compliant city. That's a huge thing. Are you sure that you're asking for everything you need?
Oh, I asked. I asked, and pleasantly is not the word that I want to use. We asked, and we were hesitant because, of course, we understand general funds are always there's always a greater need than there are resources. But we received every position that we identified a need for. Of course, in the ask, we specified why we needed and what the specific purposes and duties would entail. And the mayor's office reviewed that, and they moved swiftly. We've gotten 6 additional positions, and we were given permission to start filling those positions so that we could become more compliant. So yes, sir, I asked for everything we needed. We were awarded those and funded those positions, and we immediately saw an improvement, immediately, and so did HUD.
And the thing is we hear you when you say that you got what you needed. Because when next year when you come back here, and we're going to hear you, we're going to be wanting to see a wide gap. We're going to want to see the growth.
I captured
that should
in my
come
notes.
with 6 new people. Because Mr. Shook's arms is folded right now. They may be looking that way, and it may be a sterner look next year because you said that you're happy with what you want, and if you get it. My questions are around the key metrics. The report that you gave us has 69 days.
Yes.
And you told us it's down to 30 days.
No, sir. At the time that we printed, we were 69. We are now at 60. The federal regs mandate 30. 30 is the goal.
So we dropped down 9 days currently.
We went from 154 or more, quite honestly, to 69 to 60. And some of these, this is the average. Some of our subrecipients are actually within that 30, but we want to be very transparent with you and saying that we're not there. We're not at 30 for everyone. We're becoming compliant in other areas, are compliant in areas where we've not been compliant ever, or for a long time. I won't say ever, for a long time, and maintaining that progress.
Oh, I like this. I like the answer because it was very direct, and you also showing us improvement from 159 to 69 to 60.
Yes, sir.
And if you get the resources means staff, those unionized labor positions, you're going to get us down to 30.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I see coming. So honestly, I appreciate you on that. The next question was on the households. You, in your key metrics, you said you plan to increase the amount of households you serve with HOPWA funds?
HOPWA, yes, sir.
How do you plan to do that?
Again, it's that compliance, it's the resources. We don't provide the services. We receive the funds, we fund the entities who provide the services, and then they ask us for reimbursements. HOPWA is a reimbursable program. All entitlement grants are. So these entities must first spend the funds providing the services and then ask to be reimbursed. The faster we contract, the faster we reimburse, the more people our subrecipients can reach. Hence why our being fully staffed to make sure we take care of those subrecipients directly correlates to more households and more individuals being serviced, and HUD seeing that, in fact, the city of Atlanta is utilizing the funds that it's been allotted.
Okay. I appreciate you for coming again this morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for this time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. I don't see any other questions. Mr. Shook asked a question about the reconciliation, what was in the budget book, so I appreciate that. The one comment I would make is, two comments rather. One is just applause to you and your team for kind of jumping in the fire and really turning the ship around and addressing the concerns that our grantees have expressed, not just with HOPWA, which I've been in conversation with you about, but all the other ones as well. I think, these are precious dollars that we get and have the opportunity to invest in organizations that are doing really great work, better work that we might be able to do ourselves. So that partnership and really respecting those partnerships by being timely in terms of their grant requests and payment and all that is tantamount to our success as well. So first, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Second thing I want to just echo is there's real opportunity, I believe, and I'm going to have a sip of my coffee, but I work in the nonprofit sector as well, and so I understand there is always opportunity for additional funding. So the conversation around competitive grant applications is near and dear to my heart because those resources are out there. We just have to be able to go get them. The city's doing great work in a lot of the areas that qualify for these funds, but we just need a group and a team that can coach the user agencies, user departments to craft the applications per the grant specifications, because I do think, more often than not, when we apply, we should be winning. And that's just money that is out there that we don't have to commit general funds to, except for the management piece of it, administration piece. But it can really enhance our bucket of resources to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. So I'm excited to see that you're going to move into that. You're right, you got to get the house in order first, and then turn around. And we've been joined by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari and Councilmember Westmoreland.
Yes, sir.
But just, let's not waste any more time, let any more days, as few days slip by as possible that we're not out there chasing those opportunities. And I hope you'll continue to let us know what we can do in terms of making sure that the user departments are taking advantage of it. I understand the challenge between, it's not just y'all going and finding opportunities and saying, hey, Department of Planning, here's something you chase. They've got to be responsive as well.
Yes,
And that takes a little bit of coaching and managing as well. So just know that you'll have support from me, and I know a number of other council members when y'all get ready to really step on the gas with that.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I have to admit, this is a very different conversation than one we may have had a year ago when I wasn't here, but that's a testament, again, to the work y'all have done.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you again for your flexibility in accommodating adjusting this morning.
Yes,
and we stand in recess until 11 o'clock with the personnel paper hearing.
Thank you.
Tina, were you calling me about the board? Oh, okay.
And is this going to be substituted then at the full council?
Yes. It will be
So we have one, we'll have one more substitute. So we did provide the substitute, which will basically flesh all out that. But if we have anything to add, then yeah, we'll do one more substitute. But this is the actual.
But this is going to be, you think, like 90%?
Oh, yeah, that's like 9%.
There you go. You asked for specific enhancement. I feel like, I'm trying to print.
Hey, DC Woods.
All right, it is now 11 o'clock. It is time for our next hearing, which will be the FY23 Personnel Paper Review. We've also been joined now by Councilmember Dustin Hillis. So, Commissioner Norman, I will turn it over to you to walk us through your presentation. We'll let you finish that, and then we'll take questions from council members at that point. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Councilmember Juan and members of the City Council. Jeffrey Norman, Commissioner of the Department of Human Resources. I'm accompanied to my left by Deputy Commissioner Danielle Nichols, and to my right, I'm accompanied by Interim Deputy Commissioner Lorette Woods. And so we are here today to provide an overview of the FY23 personnel paper. And so, let me just see, am I controlling? Or are they controlling? I'm not sure. But we will start off, we have provided the PowerPoint presentation. We have also provided a bound copy of the actual personnel paper itself. So that has been substituted by Finance Executive Committee, but we will give you a high-level overview of the personnel paper. So just wanted to start off and identify the priorities that were established for the personnel paper. You will find in this paper the final phase and completion of the Atlanta Fire Rescue Department salary increases. While that was originally slated to go through a 4-phase cycle, we are consolidating the last 2 years of that actual salary completion to complete that this year in contemplation of including fire along with all of the other departments for the citywide compensation study. Also wanted to just highlight that there will be a 2% cost of a living adjustment associated with the proposed FY23 budget. There is also slated to be an extension of the current premium pay program, which was previously scheduled to terminate on June 30th of 2022. That will be extended through fiscal year 23 to end June 30th of 2023. And also wanted to provide that this is also focused on ensuring that there are reclassifications to ensure there is an alignment of all departmental position classifications to support the strategic initiatives of the city as well as the respective operating departments. If we go to the next slide, that slide will show, and let me just make sure, are we? Yeah, I'm not getting a, okay, there we go. And if we can go to the next slide. Okay, there we go.
Come on in here.
All right. And so if you take a look, what I provided is a snapshot of the personnel paper that was included in the bound copy within the notebook. But this will show you that, you know, the respective categories and summary of the personnel actions that are contained collectively for all of the departments. You will see that that is approximately 1,043 total actions for the FY23 personnel paper. This is a very modest paper. We've seen a 31% reduction on the number of actions from FY22. As we take a look at that and shift to the next page, I've also provided council with a legend which will walk you through the personnel paper terminology. So if you have any questions about, you know, those respective categories such as abolishments, position creations, reclassifications, those are listed out for you on those next 2 pages. Also wanted to just share before we jump into the respective departmental summaries that as of today, June 9th of 2022, we have approximately 8,253 field positions across the city of Atlanta. To build the general fund personnel budget allocations for FY23, in coordination with the Department of Finance, they funded field positions as well as active recruitments. Active recruitments are defined as backfills approved by the Vacancy Review Board. The personnel paper includes transactions that are needed to realign positions from the FY22 budget to the FY23 proposed budget. The personnel paper will implement those adjustments that are reflected in the budget book and have been discussed in the department's respective budget presentations. Once we have aligned personnel to the budget through the personnel paper, departments will move forward with their approved budgets and approved positions. During the year, there will be some level of natural attrition due to retirements and other activities. Department heads will be able to backfill for these positions through the existing Vacancy Review Board process. Over time, as positions become vacant, department heads may desire to use that available funding to backfill for the same position or in a different position. In either case, this process can be managed through the Vacancy Review Board. This overall process will enable department heads the ability to maintain staffing in key areas while keeping the overall city within the financial bounds of the budget. And with that, we will shift to the first section of the presentation, the City Council, and I will go ahead and pass the clicker to Deputy City Commissioner Danielle Nichols.
I got a promotion.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and council members. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I will facilitate the initial navigation of the FY23 proposed personnel actions as we advance to Section 2 of the presentation, which begins with City Council. There are 5 proposed actions consisting of 2 abolishments, along with the creation of a new classification and 2 position creations to more appropriately align resources. Moving to Section 3, which represents ATL DOT. There are 216 proposed actions, with the bulk of these actions consisting of position creations that bridge the need of basic run and maintain jobs that assist with delivering high-quality service, along with supporting the Mayor's Safe Streets initiative. Salary adjustments and grade amendments to address parity and market alignment of critical roles, and reclassifications to align current job duties and responsibilities with the appropriate grade to fortify resources that support various mayoral initiatives. Next up is Section 4, which is AIM. You will see there are 39 proposed actions. Most of the actions consist of classification creations to assist with aligning employees' current job duties and responsibilities. There are also reclassifications to line up position classifications with existing job duties and responsibilities.
So, colleagues, I'm going to say, since we're moving through kind of department by department, if you have a question about that particular department, just go ahead and jump in, rather than waiting to the end and then flipping back. So just turn your microphone on and ask away. But if you don't hear anything, just keep moving.
Yes, sir. Moving on to Section 5 for WorkSource Atlanta. There are 4 proposed actions for this agency to include 3 position creations to place incumbents in full-time authorized positions and 1 reclassification without an incumbent to meet the business needs of the operation. Next up is Section 6 for the Internal City Auditor's Office. There are a total of 6 actions consisting of 1 classification creation to create career progression and enhance retention, 1 position creation to align resources and critical skills, and 3 reclassifications with incumbent to create career progression and enhance retention. Forwarding to Section 7 for the Department of Aviation, there are 226 actions, with the bulk of these actions consisting of position creations to introduce restructuring and insert appropriate alignment of resources to accommodate existing and growing demands of customers and stakeholders, reclassifications with incumbent to reorganize and change the scope of the job for current employees, reclassifications without an incumbent to repurpose existing vacancies for reorganization, new business demands, and work streams, and rounding off with salary grade adjustments for pay equity and organizational alignment for similarly scoped positions. Next up is Section 8 for the Citizens Review Board, and there are no proposed actions. Moving on to Section 9, which is the Department of City Planning, and there are also no proposed actions for this department. Next up is Section 10, which is the Department of Corrections. There are 5 proposed actions consisting of reclassifications to align with current job duties and responsibilities, and grade amendments to address pay equity and organizational alignment for similarly scoped positions. I will now yield my time momentarily to DC Wood so she can escort you through a few additional sections of the paper.
Good morning. The next section is Section 11, and that's for ATL 311. They have a total of 8 actions. The classification creations are reinforcing their leadership structure, and then position creations, funding allocations, and reclassifications with incumbents to align resources more appropriately and for their reorganization. Moving on to the next section. Section 12 is the Department of Enterprise Assets Management. This department has 30 total actions. They have classification creations to meet the needs of the business operations, position creations to align incumbents in the appropriate job classifications, and position transfers to move security personnel from the Department of Enterprise Assets Management to executive offices. Moving on to Section 13 for executive offices, they have a total of 29 actions. Classification creations to provide for current business needs, position creations to align incumbents in the appropriate job classifications, position transfers to align positions to the appropriate cost centers, and reclassifications with and without incumbents to restructure and to align current and future resources. DC Nichols.
Finance.
The Finance Department is up next, and that's 25 actions. They have above-entry hiring authorities which are requested to assist with their hiring and to give them expanded hiring power. Funding allocations, which will realign their resources more appropriately. Position transfers, which will also align their resources more appropriately, and reclassifications with incumbents.
Moving on to Section 15, which is the Department of Fire Rescue, there are 39 proposed actions consisting of classification creations to align current job duties and responsibilities related to EMS and fire inspection roles, position creations to more appropriately align resources for fire medical responders and fire inspectors, and reclassifications with and without incumbents to support the change in priorities.
I'm going to stop and ask a question here. So the fire, what is in the personnel paper, does it reflect what was presented in terms of the very first budget content with salaries, or does it reflect a shift, another adjustment since that time?
So we have had we have included within the bound notebook, you will see that the substitute that was provided, has been subsequent discussion, so that tier structure has been modified. That tier structure is represented within the copy of the personnel paper that is in the bound booklet. The takeaways from that, and you will see it in the latter section of the personnel paper. So we've had several discussions. We did have an opportunity to talk with the union, and so we were able to come to an agreement on the acceleration of the payments as well as the spread of those salaries to ensure, number one, that we provided that enhanced level of compensation, and also ensured that we protected and prevented any type of compression issues within those respective tiers. What you'll see is that previously there was a 4-tier system for firefighters. You'll note that you will have a shift, an increase in the actual recruit salary, as well as you'll see an expansion of the tiers. You now have a 5-tier system for firefighters, and you will see those respective salary increases along those tier schedules. We were able to maintain the spread so that there would not be compression amongst the ranks, which was one of the pre-existing issues, and we agreed that obviously along with all other employees, fire will be included in the citywide compensation study, and so we anticipate we'll be back pretty shortly to talk about, future alignment along with all the other departments as well.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the budget that we were presented at the beginning of May, end of April, had a series of enhancements in there.
Correct.
The book that you just gave us today, and this is what was substituted, was brought in, I guess, Monday. We substituted personnel paper this Monday.
Correct.
Reflects yet another adjustment. So
Correct.
right now there's not, if I look at this, it doesn't match what was presented to us in the original budget, correct?
So and I'll let finance answer the question. I think that the funding that was appropriated will cover the modifications to the tier system.
Okay.
As far as the tier chart itself, what is currently represented, and I believe that we did, I'll go back and double check, but I believe that was updated and the substitute that was adopted. Okay. But I will double check that, but we do have the correct chart in the handout we have before you today.
All right. So I'll ask one more question to make sure I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. What is before us today represents just the structure piece of it.
That is correct.
And some of the compensation piece, but all the compensation piece still falls within what we saw in the original budget book at the beginning of May, correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so someone trying to understand exactly what's happening would need to kind of pour through this, but know that the dollar amount from what was presented at the beginning of May has not changed for fire, correct?
And I'll defer to finance to answer that.
That's correct.
Councilmember Hillis's hand, yeah.
Yes, that's correct. The conversations, the CFO and the commissioner worked very closely on the calculations to accommodate those adjustments, as well as some of the positions that you've talked about, and those are included in the dollar amount that's in the fire department's budget.
Thank you. Councilmember Hillis.
Thank you. Chairman, just a request, just to answer some of these questions a little more clearly. I think what would help is if we could receive a document that, number one, breaks down currently today what firefighters, the gamut of ranks are being paid, what the Mercer Study recommended in all of those ranks, and then what the current agreement that apparently has been reached, what that would get them up to.
Okay.
And if there are any deviations from the Mercer Study, a statement as to why that was. And I know the overall issue from the previous administration, and that has even been talked about with the current administration, is compression, but when Mercer did the study, that was one of the things they were asked to address, and they placed, I believe, a 6% deviation between each rank. So just a little more information as to why we're doing studies and then not adopting and doing some fairly large adjustments to what the study recommended, because as we're doing this coming fiscal year, we're going to do a pay and class study. So we're going to continue to do that. So if I could just get that document as requested.
Okay, we'd be happy to provide that. And, to your point, I do just want to note that, Mayor Dickens is obviously, committed to moving forward our public safety agencies. He recognizes the continuing shift in the compensation dynamic for those respective bodies. One of the reasons that he did decide to go ahead and accelerate and go ahead and collapse, this year as well as next year's contemplated raises is to ensure that we get current treatment for that fire department population, and then recognizing that since there has been a gap in time between 2019 and current day, that we get that most recent up-to-date market data as we will be getting with all of our other agencies, so that fire would not be an outlier. And they can go through that same analysis and have those same adjustments that align with current market rates as we go and prepare for the FY24 budget. But we do have that historical data, and we can kind of provide, that progression that will show the current to the proposed, as well as couple that with those recommendations that came from the Mercer Study. And I mentioned the piece about the compression piece because that was one of the significant findings as well. And so we wanted to ensure that we did not throw a wrench into the significant work that had been made from that respect. So we've had very thoughtful conversations with the fire union, and we're all of one accord at this point. And so we're excited about moving forward with these compensation increases and then coming back to this body in the short future to kind of have some discussions about the findings of the citywide compensation study as well. I do.
Hope not.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's... We do.
Yeah, I added that for drama. Can I, pretty simple document request, can I get that by the end of day tomorrow?
Yeah, because I think, most of that we already have compiled, so we'll definitely make sure we get that to you by close of business.
All right. Thanks so much, Commissioner.
No problem.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Anyone else while we're on fire?
Section 16, this is the Department of Grants and Community Development. They have a total of 7 actions. Classification creation to strengthen their leadership structure and align resources more appropriately, and position creations, which will address their current skill deficits and expanded responsibilities needed to support the grants organization. Section 17 moves on to the Department of Human Resources, where there are 27 transactions, classification creations supporting the Employee and Labor Relations Division, funding allocation to realign resources with current job duties, position transfers to align current positions in appropriate cost centers, and reclassifications with and without incumbents due to changing priorities. Section 18 moves us on to the Office of Inspector General. This office, as you know, is made up of 3 divisions: the Ethics Division, the Independent Procurement Review Division, and the Compliance Division. There are 11 actions requested for the Office of Inspector General. Classification creations to establish classifications that reflect the responsibilities needed to support the business. Position creations are intended to expand and strengthen the services provided by all of these divisions within OIG. And salary grade amendments for pay equity and organizational alignment.
I do have a question about this. So there was expressed need from the director in terms of some salary enhancements for some of her positions, but I understand in some subsequent conversations that might be able to be taken care of rather than a budget amendment or adjustment that going into next year, reallocating resources from other unused budget line items. And that would simply be a personnel paper amendment in FY23, as well as a kind of transfer of funds from line item to line item. Is that correct? Is that a correct interpretation?
That would capture it, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Section 19 is Judicial Agencies. There are 2 actions requested by judicial agencies: position creation, which will place incumbents in full-time authorized position, and reclassification with incumbent due to changing priorities. The Law Department is covered in Section 20 with 37 actions. These are largely around reclassifications. These reclassifications will align employees more appropriately with their current job duties and responsibilities, and then funding allocations to appropriate positions to their appropriate cost center splits. Section 21 is the Department of Parks and Recreation. There are 10 actions requested. Above entry hiring authority will allow the department flexibility to offer salaries that align with applicant experience. Classification creations establish the final level of the tree trimmer classification. Position creations to place incumbents in full-time authorized positions. Reclassifications with incumbents to align resources appropriately. And salary grade amendments to address pay equity and expanded responsibilities.
The next slide represents Section 22 for the Atlanta Police Department. Before you are 34 proposed actions, with the majority residing in above entry positions to attract IT professionals for GIS coordinator, end user support manager, and computer aided dispatch administrator. Creation classifications and position classifications to align resources more appropriately, and reclassifications with and without incumbents to support departmental reorganization.
Section 23 is the Department of Procurement, where there are 17 actions requested. They are abolishing a position. They have classification creations to support the reorganization. Funding allocations to align resources more appropriately, position transfers to allocate positions to the appropriate cost centers, and reclassifications with and without incumbents due to the reorganization and a change in priorities of the department. The Public Defender's Office is under Section 24. There are 7 actions requested. The reclassification with incumbent to promote and address turnover of personnel in key positions, and salary grade amendments to provide salary range expansion to adjust for current market conditions and strengthen retention of mission-critical positions.
The next slide is Section 25, which reflects the Department of Public Works. There are 7 proposed actions consisting of reclassifications with and without incumbents to align resources more appropriately within solid waste collections and to support the Operation Clean Sweep initiative, which will maintain and enhance the beautification of the city.
Section 26 is the Solicitor's Office, where 18 actions are requested. Classification creations to provide a career path progression and enable the department to retain talent and reduce turnover, and reclassification with incumbent to better align employee classifications with current job duties and responsibilities. Section 27 is the Department of Watershed Management. There are 237 actions requested. They are abolishing 31 positions, position transfers to align resources into the appropriate cost centers, employee salary adjustments for pay parity and to improve the organization's ability to recruit and retain top talent, reclassification with incumbent to acknowledge an increase in skill and contributions across the department, and reclassifications without incumbent, allowing the use of existing vacancies to be aligned with classifications needed to fill the business needs of Watershed.
And as we conclude, as the personnel paper concludes the operating department transactions, as we discussed as part of the Atlanta Fire Rescue, the personnel paper will also include the proposed adjusted new tier structure for the Atlanta Fire Department, and so that will set out the respective tiers and their salary, their increased salary structure. We will also have references for the 2% COLA, as well as the extension of the premium pay. That will conclude the overview of the FY23 FY23 proposed personnel paper, and we're available for any additional questions.
All right, I understand. Before I recognize Dr. Hillis, Justin Hillis, I want to recognize Dr. Wilson, who wanted to give some more information about a press release that just came out around fire compensation.
Thank you. Yeah, the announcement that just came out regarding the adjustments with fire will require a budget amendment, and we're prepared to put together the budget amendment to address the increase in fire's budget for that.
So what you're saying, there will be an increase in the personnel totals for fire to accommodate the negotiated agreement in terms of compensation?
That's correct.
Okay. Councilmember Hillis, you have the floor.
First, I have a number of questions about the kind of reorganization within APD. I don't want you to answer those. I'll ask Chief Sherbaum to go through those and the reasoning for those other than just the simple reorganization. But what I would like to request of HR is to provide, I guess, a paper, a graph showing, I know we got this in police's presentation, but I imagine that wasn't. I believe we were told that was a few months old. It's the number of filled sworn positions, and I know, I guess we count recruits as sworn, so identify the number of people within there that are classified as recruits that are in training, and then the number of funded sworn vacancies that currently exist and what is proposed in the FY23 budget. Please.
Okay, we can provide that information to you.
If I can just get that before Public Safety Committee on Monday, that'd be great.
Not a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Tell us about the, what I believe you referred to as the Vacancy Review Board,
Yes.
and what's that? How does it function?
So the Vacancy Review Board was established as an internal executive function. That function facilitates what the beginning of the hiring cycle. And so we have what is referred to as a request to fill, or an RTF, that starts at the department level. And so when there is a vacancy within a department, they will submit that document that identifies that position, the anticipated salary for that position. To the extent that there is also a request to create an extra help position, there's a requirement that the departments indicate whether or not that is a temporary extra help position, whether that is intended to be a permanent extra help, which means that that is a position that is filled in anticipation of creating that position as part of a forthcoming personnel paper. The first step of that process is for that request to then be funneled to the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy. They will then review that request in line with department's current personnel spend, and they will make a recommendation relative to whether or not that department's personnel budget can accommodate that request. That then comes through Human Resources. We will compile all of the requests to fill. We will then put that before the Vacancy Review Board, which is chaired by the Chief Operating Officer and supported by the Department of Human Resources and the Department of Finance. That is a weekly cadence. So normally those that are submitted the prior week and work their way through the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy, then as part of the Vacancy Review Board process on that weekly cadence, there will be a determination made as to whether or not those are approved or not. Once those RTFs are approved, then we move forward with the posting of the position so that departments can then recruit for those respective roles.
So in effect, the COO is the sort of the decider at the end of the line.
That is correct. And that is obviously for all of those executive reporting.
And is that a holdover from the last activity from the last administration?
So that process was started in the fall of 2019.
Okay.
And we are looking at potential modifications to that process, but nonetheless, we will still maintain that level of oversight.
Okay, good. So your summary shows the creation of 167 new positions. I'll have to go back and compare that to, some prior years. It seems like a lot. So what are some typical drivers that result in a new position?
And so as folks look at their strategic objectives, meaning that obviously there are priorities that the city has that have been pushed down to the respective operating departments. And so some of that may require, the need for establishing new roles. We do understand that, there's several ways to accomplish that. The preferred method is, doing the harder work to look at your existing positions and then reclassify some of that existing FTE headcount. We do anticipate once we get on the other side of the personnel paper and have these adjustments, we will go back and do an exhaustive review as we continue to have those discussions about funded, unfunded positions and, make some recommendations on abolishments, especially in that unfunded category, so that we can have a closer alignment with, understanding really what those true FTEs are that are available to be filled.
Yeah, and I was wondering about the relationship between, it might seem logical that if we're creating 167 new positions, what that really is a kind of a more aptly defining a particular job, and so, but we're only abolishing 43 positions. It seems like that should be more of a one-to-one.
No, and we do recognize that there is an appetite and there is a larger pool of positions that will be abolished. There are some ongoing discussions relative to that as departments shore up their FY23 staffing plans, and so we do anticipate we'll be back early in FY23, with an abolishment paper to kind of clean that up.
Okay. And then in terms of your sort of justification notes here, aligning resources more appropriately must show up 6,000 times in this, but I'm guessing that those four little words cover a lot of different situations. Now, I'm going to have to go back because I know in the past there was a little more kind of texture provided there because I'm not sure that aligning resources more appropriately means the same thing in every one of these instances. Kind of another boilerplate thing here is equity adjustment. So it gives some examples of who's getting compared and who you're trying to true up compared to who with.
Yeah, so I think that, first starting with the aligning resources appropriately, what we continue to see is that in this fluid environment, as departments are asked, to execute on different initiatives, that often requires that there be different responsibilities either added to a role or they shift that actual classification to something that's a little bit different or broader, and so that's why you will see that realignment. And so that is kind of what that broad definition describes. And so, for example, if you had a role where someone was doing A and B, and based on new strategic initiatives, they're now required to do C or D, we want to make sure that that's reflected in their job description. That may actually change the title of that role and the function of that role as well. And so that is why you will see that larger bucket of reclassifications, because that is a result of the hard work that the operating departments are doing to make sure that they have the right functions to support their service delivery. As we talk about the equity adjustments, prior to us getting to the citywide comp study, there is a continual look to make sure that as we look across the organization, that you have similar type positions being compensated accordingly. And so that is an opportunity, even as we do, what I will call a mini market studies as well, to make sure that we don't have folks who are grossly, underrepresented from a compensation standpoint. And when we do find those pockets, then departments obviously want to make sure that, we are definitely treating all of our employees equally. And so that is when we will make those equity adjustments.
So is the city still in a position where there are certain functions, employees within the enterprise funds that are making more money than the same people with the same jobs in general fund departments?
So what we do find is that, there are some similarly situated positions that we have looked at. And so, for example, we have looked at some of the technical positions and whether or not the enterprise funds have been able, to offer higher compensation based on their resources. So we have identified some of those pockets. So we have, obviously included that as part of the, review and analysis as part of our citywide comp study. But there are a couple of those pockets. I'll give, for example, we noted, electricians, we have seen that, that looks different for an individual, for example, who may be supporting aviation than it may for the general fund. And so we have identified a couple of those small pockets that we're taking a very close look at.
Okay. Well, and then I have no pride of ownership in referring to it as the Shook report, but when do we get it?
Yes, and so I know that we committed after we got through the personnel presentation, we would put that together, so I know that Ms. Weeks is working on finalizing that for you.
So we should expect to get it.
Wednesday? So it sounds like we'll have that for you on Wednesday. or before.
Thank you.
I was going to say, can we try and have that before the FEC meeting Wednesday?
Yes.
Would be right.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Jason Winston. Ms. Norwood, you have the floor.
What's our total count again? A general fund, filled and funded employees, and then enterprise funds? Just the top line number.
Yeah, so we're approximately 8,253 field positions. I don't have
Across all funds?
That's across all the funds. I don't have that breakdown, but I can obviously get that for you and send that to you today.
Okay. We know we are now making adjustments for fire, and I hope we will be making some adjustments for police. We know we're going to deal with the solid waste fees. We know we're dealing with the levy that was brought up the other day. At some point, there's got to be a way that we don't just continue to grow. We just gave the city $750 million in capital funding. I mean, it's a lot. So we've now got new debt, and we've got an increase in the levy, and we've got solid waste fees, and we've got over 8,200 employees. I mean, we have a lot. We have a lot in the executive offices that are going to come in this afternoon. We have a lot. And, the major things that people out there want us to do is to do the work of the city. Fix the streets, protect our communities, both safety and environmentally. And a lot of this stuff they really don't care about. I know it's important here, and this is my fourth stint down here. I know it's important here, but it seems to me that we ought to be looking at a lot of personnel actions. I get it, and I know everybody. I ran a radio company. In hard times. Came out the other side of it, did well. So I've done it, not at this scale, but I just think y'all are key to making sure that we're right-sized. Because we know the vast, vast, vast majority of what we do here is pay people. That's what we do. Every one of these budgets, you'll have a few other line items, but the bulk of it is people. So what is our span of control? How many layers do we have? Different departments came in here with different ways that they did, how they, what their org charts were and whatever. But we haven't really done that span of control. I was here 10 years ago when people asked for that. I'd like to officially request that we get that. I mean, do we have one person supervising 3 people or 50 people, or how many people are, how many layers and how many people under those layers? And, this I've been doing for years. I get it. I've been looking at the book for years. But it doesn't give me a real understanding of we have right-sized every department. We're giving, I get that we need to give raises. Lord knows we need our people to stay. And we're having huge problems, and a lot of that is pension. And I don't know what y'all's role with pension is, but, it got really readjusted, and those of us who have cared for the past several years are not surprised with your attrition. If you mess with people's pension to the degree that the pensions have been messed with, they're out of here. They're out of here after 4 or 5 years. They get trained and they're gone, and they're moving quickly. And so we've got to deal with what's right sizing, what are the right employee benefits. And I know some of that is not you guys per se, but I think your department is extraordinarily important in giving us a real sense that we've got a handle on it and that we're going to spend our money where and how it needs to be spent.
Thank you for those insightful comments, Councilmember Norwood. I did want to share that, Mayor Dickens has a keen focus, number one, on ensuring that the city continues to provide, operational excellence. And as part of making sure that, that is executed appropriately, the Chief Operating Officer has honed in on, having some expectations for the operating departments about those very issues, making sure that there is a very deep dive on operational structures and really understanding the fulfillment of core services and those identified initiatives on behalf of the city. And so it really is to cut to the chase to make sure that we do have that level of operational excellence and that it is supported in the correct fashion. So those efforts are underway in a different, forum, but nonetheless they are, and I'm sure we'll be able to come back and share those with you early on in FY23.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got a couple questions. The pay and class study is funded in FY22 or funded in FY23?
It is funded for FY23.
Okay, so it is, but the funding is allocated in the budget?
That is correct.
Okay.
It is.
All right, thank you. Second question I have is regarding a request. So the personnel paper summary in terms of all the actions. Can you also do this in a way that shows us per department? So
yes. So so if you look at the respective slides.
Yeah, I'm saying, is there one sheet that captures all that so we can?
We can. Yeah,
we help.
Yeah, I actually do have we do actually have a spreadsheet that shows that. That's a one-pager, so I'll forward that to you guys.
That'd be helpful, only because that leads into my final question is that, all right, so we've been hearing from each of the departments about the headwinds on recruiting. And so one of the things that we're hearing also is that it's just competitive out there and that we're trying to find ways to enhance our positions, one of which is compensation, right? So as I was looking at the summary page, I was trying to figure out, okay, is this revealing to me that, yeah, we're trying to help enhance our salaries to be competitive? And obviously employee salary adjustment is one way. The reclassification with incumbent or even without incumbent is another in terms of being able to retain our folks, but then also attract folks. And then the salary grade amendment is. But I have to say I'm surprised that those numbers are lower than what I would have expected given what we've heard from all the department heads. Is that just simply a function of folks have enough room within the salary grade range or the grade salary range to move folks up to stay competitive and retain? And these are just the ones where they have to get extra?
That would be correct, Councilmember Wan. So, for example, we have done some market studies within some departments that have shown that for some specific classifications, often those studies have shown that folks still fall within those established ranges. And because departments do have an ability and authorization to do some shifts up to 10% of those salaries, those things have happened, but they didn't need to be legislatively authorized. So that's why you won't see the full scope of those types of actions represented in a personnel paper.
Okay. Yeah, for example, I looked at employee salary adjustment, and of the 161 actions, 137 are in Watershed. So,
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so if I could get that one table, that would be really helpful.
Yes, we have that, so we'll forward that to you.
That concludes my questions. Span of control, yeah, they said it was included in the FY23 budget. And you want? Go ahead, Chuck.
Okay, no, I thought you were referring to pay in class. I'm talking about span of control. Span of control was on the city budget wish list. We've been pining for one since the Reid administration. Is that going to be accomplished coming up?
And so tell me a little bit about your request just to make sure that I understand.
So under the Reid administration, when Ms. Yancey was in the position you now hold, she continuously told us that, and this was a hobby horse, a favorite hobby horse of Miss Adrian's, and she brought it up every chance she could. And then we started hearing, oh yeah, there's one, it'll be here, in 60 days. Well, there never was one. And so a lot of us have not forgotten that and think it would be very insightful for us to see, and maybe span of control study means different things to different people, but I've never seen this organization looked at in any way remotely similar to that. I'm sure it would be, it might be unpleasant to look at, but it would be eye-opening, and I don't know how we sort of move forward without seeing that. And so I don't know how much a span of control study off the rack would cost, but I'm going to, take up the torch from Miss Adrian until we get one.
Yeah, so that is obviously something we can take a very close look at. It's not something that we had on our bullet list, but we'll obviously go back and add that, and we'll do some research on.
So you would have to hire. So I assume that you would not be able to do that in-house.
There is a possibility that we can accomplish that internally, and so I strongly suspect that we can get you the type of data that you're looking for. So we'll go back and have some discussions. We'll have an update for you at Finance Exec.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, and then Mr. Orwood, you're going to follow up with a span of control? Okay.
Just wanted to say, you've shown us org charts, and you've shown us how many people are in them.
Yes.
I think from an org chart and how many people are supervising how many people, we ought to get pretty close to it.
Yeah, we have the ability, and, that is one of the reasons we do continue to focus on the ability to have direct access to data as we have implemented, Oracle and those other things. So, I believe that that's something we can clearly accomplish, but we'll just go back and make sure that we take a look at the data, make sure it's giving us the export for the actual metrics that you're looking for.
One of the more interesting presentations was the one from transportation. It's totally flat. So you have the different department heads, and then you have the people. And it's not 5 layers. It's not 5 layers going down. It's flat. So take a look at that, because it was very different than any other department here. And has that been more successful or not more successful? We know the commissioner's leaving, but I think that's a really interesting thing for y'all to examine as to whether or not other departments ought to follow that model, or if that model, in fact, was not as successful as it seemed to be when we heard the reports.
Yeah, and what we want to be careful of is, what I will say is that sometimes there's some, artistic license given sometimes on the way some org charts are presented. So we just want to make sure the data does match up what you're seeing on those visuals. But that will be told by the data that we pull.
And I think we always just wanted to know the layers.
Yes.
How many layers do you have, and how many people are in those layers? Because at the end of the day, it's the people that get the work done and the people that make sure the work gets done. That's really all we need.
No, I understand your request. So.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Lewis.
And I want to say, I want to thank you for being in support of the Employee and Labor Relationship Division and Relations Division. It was something that my office was adamant about putting forth, and we actually held that paper because you all are already in conversations for creating that. So I'm excited about that. That way we can increase the amount of communication between labor and HR. I want to say I saw the email today from the mayor's office to firefighters. Is that something you all are also in support of?
And so are you talking about, I haven't had an opportunity.
With the 7% to 15.5% raises guaranteed to all firefighters.
So we did have a discussion before I think you were able to join us, and we laid out the new tier structure and the actual raises where the mayor committed to, accelerating those raises because it was scheduled to complete for next fiscal year. He accelerated those to complete those this year. We have met with the fire union. We have agreement on what those terms will look like. We've included within the binder what those new salaries will be and what those tiers are. We have added a new tier 5 to the firefighter range, and so that gives increased ability to be able to manage that salary spread. We've also enhanced the recruit pay as well to help with, recruiting individuals into that profession as well. And so now that we'll be completing that pay cycle on July 1st, fire will also be included in the citywide comp study because now we will be focused on looking at the current market rates for all city employees and then shortly coming back and having those discussions with this body, about any proposed enhancements for FY24.
Okay. And I know I was mainly been concerned with turnaround time to actually hire folks since I've been here. And I see we've been trying to get that down as much as possible. I salute you for your efforts in getting that together. Do you have the staffing that you think you need in order to reach the efforts that we need, that I think we need to, of 30 days of less of actually bringing people on? Do you think that you have the amount of resources and staff?
We do have appropriate resources to be able to perform that function. We do have a couple of task force that we are currently, working our way through, doing some analysis on some of those very efforts just to make sure that we identify additional efficiencies. At the end of the day, there's some of the components that we cannot internally control, and so we continue to be creative about those things that we can actually do to stop those gaps when we don't have control internally. So, for example, I think we talked the other day a little bit about the background process, which is done externally, making sure that we also work with the departments to ensure not only that, we're applying resources on our side, but ultimately for the majority of positions, those departments still have to do the direct hire. So they're the ones who are evaluating once we give them qualified candidates. They're the ones who still have to make sure, along with performing their day-to-day duties, they're still carving enough time out, to give that appropriate review. But we continue to provide guidance on how to accelerate that. And so we have seen some efficiencies. We do anticipate, based on some work that we're currently doing, that we'll continue to see that accelerate, especially for FY23, because to the extent that there may have been any resource issues, those have been evaluated. So I think departments are, readily equipped to be able to jump on top of that.
Well, I'm excited. Now. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bond. We've been joined by Councilmember Bond, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Norman, for your presentation, you and your staff. As I raised this question with the Parks and Recreation Commissioner Dargle, and I'm going to ask you. I've gotten reports or testimonies from employees in the Parks and Recreation Division that new hires are basically almost making the same as the supervisors that have been there 10 and 20 years. Have you all looked internally about how to deal with that kind of, I guess that's a compression issue, where someone coming in with no experience their salary is almost equal to that of the person who's been there several decades?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Bond. Obviously, we continue to have the opportunity to take looks at compression issues within the city. We talked a little bit earlier about equity adjustments. And so I don't think we have taken any deep analysis within the Parks Division, but we'll definitely take note of that, and we'll get with the department, and we'll do that analysis to make sure that, we don't have that type of issue. Because what we talked about a little bit earlier was that obviously we want to ensure that folks are, treated in a fair fashion, that we have that appropriate spread, that folks are compensated accordingly. But we'll definitely go back and we'll start that analysis.
Okay, thank you. And, I appreciate what you said about the fire department's salaries. I was at the firefighters memorial, so I wasn't here at the beginning of your presentation. But I wanted to ask, I know that the police union had raised issues about their salaries and compensation, the 2%. Has that been addressed? And I apologize if it's been addressed in this meeting already.
So we did not have a discussion here today relative to police salaries. I will share with you that the administration recently did have discussions with the police union. I think we are of one accord on a strategic approach relative to some of those issues that they have raised. And I'm sure that the administration will be, providing some context to that in the near future.
Okay. Thank you very much. I withdraw, Mr. Chair.
And thinking about what Councilmember Bonds just said about folks working in parks for a long time, I'm thinking about recreation. I want to make sure that we look at recreation in the same exact manner. Last night, Miss B, I'm not going to say her entire name, she's been there. I told her, I said her story in this room before, and she smiled, but she said I had one thing wrong. She was I said she was 18 years working for Parks and Rec, making $18.51. She's actually 19 years working for Parks and Rec, making $18.51, and she's only $18.51 because of that $3.21 premium pay. And so I just want to make sure that we look into that, because how do we keep her if we're not going to? And she don't want to leave. So how do we keep her if we're not going to take care of her? So thank you for Mr. Bond for bringing that up. But think about recreation. I know we're focused a lot on parks, but think about recreation as well. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Lewis. What I would share is that, I think, as you know, Mayor Dickens is, definitely champions, members of the workforce. And so, as we continue to talk about, some of these pockets, I think at the end of the day, the goal is, especially as we approach FY23, is to ensure that is one of the purposes for the citywide compensation. So while we continue those efforts, he definitely has, set a bar to make sure that we do have that investment, and you will see that in almost everything he touches relative to the workforce. And so we do have that underlying, momentum to ensure that we do continue to focus on that we're very strategic in those approaches. And so we don't want those individuals like Ms. B, to be forgotten about, and we value their service to the city, and we want to make sure that they are treated accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I think that concludes our questions. I will say a quick thank you for being very proactive in terms of cleaning up the personnel paper during the year. I appreciate the calculation of the reduction from last year's actions, but that's only because y'all are staying on top of this, so it helps our process. It's important because with personnel being 2/3 of our budget, this is where it gets effectuated. So thank you very much to you and your team.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right, colleagues, we are now going to break for a lunch. Remember that there is a 1:30 special call meeting here in Chambers, followed by 2:30, our last hearing of the season with executive offices. So we'll see y'all then.